Welcome to World Alert Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. Breaking news. The Supreme Court has struck down Trump's controversial metal tariffs in a landmark ruling that is already making waves across the nation and around the world. This decision is shaking up American trade policy, sending ripples through industries, financial markets, and government offices alike. In a historic move, the court has overturned the sweeping steel and aluminum tariffs imposed during the Trump administration, which had sparked fierce debate and global retaliation. This decision redraws the boundaries of presidential authority, sending shockwaves through Washington and global markets. The ruling is being called one of the most significant checks on executive power in recent years. The majority opinion declared that the executive branch overstepped its constitutional authority by using an old law to justify broad, indefinite tariffs, arguing that such sweeping actions require clear congressional approval. The justices emphasized that regulating foreign commerce is Congress's job, not the president's, reaffirming the separation of powers at the heart of the U.S. government. Critics of the tariffs see this as a major victory for free trade and a crucial opportunity to repair relationships with key allies who were hit by retaliatory measures. Supporters of the tariffs, however, fear for the future of American steel and aluminum workers, who now face increased exposure to global competition and potential job losses. The ruling comes at a time of economic uncertainty, with inflation and ongoing supply chain issues already straining businesses and consumers. Many are left wondering how this new policy landscape will affect their bottom line. The sudden removal of tariffs introduces both new risks and fresh opportunities. Will it lower costs for American families or flood the market with cheap imports that threaten local industries? Economists are divided, with some predicting a boost for consumers and others warning of long-term harm to domestic manufacturing. But one thing is clear: the Supreme Court has reset the economic playing field for millions of Americans, and the effects will be felt for years to come. The debate over the future of U.S. trade policy is just beginning, and the nation will be watching closely as leaders chart a new course in the global economy. At the heart of the Supreme Court's recent decision lies a fundamental question about the balance of power in American government. This case is all about the separation of powers, how authority is divided and checked between the branches of government. The court closely examined Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a law that allows presidents to impose tariffs if they believe national security is at risk. This provision has been a powerful tool, giving the executive branch significant influence over trade policy. The Trump administration used Section 232 as a broad justification for sweeping tariffs, arguing that national security concerns gave the president wide latitude. However, the Supreme Court clarified that this authority was never intended to be limitless or unchecked. The justices emphasized that Congress, not the president, holds the primary constitutional authority to regulate foreign commerce and set the rules for international trade. This ruling marks a significant shift. Congress cannot simply delegate its core responsibilities to the executive branch and walk away. The court is signaling that legislative oversight must be real and ongoing. If lawmakers want future presidents to have broad powers to impose tariffs, they must pass new, explicit laws that clearly define those powers and their limits. As a result, future presidents will face much stricter scrutiny when they try to use national security as a reason for trade restrictions. They will need to justify their actions more thoroughly and work within clearer boundaries set by Congress. The era of unilateral trade action by the executive branch is coming to an end. Presidents must now collaborate with Congress and rely more on negotiation and diplomacy to shape America's trade relationships. For Congress, this is both a restoration of its constitutional power and a call to take a more active role in shaping trade policy. Lawmakers must now step up to the challenge, actively debating tariffs, negotiating trade agreements, and deciding how best to protect American industries and workers in a rapidly changing global economy. The days of passive oversight and rubber-stamping executive decisions are over. Congress must engage, deliberate, and lead. A new era of legislative engagement on trade has begun, promising a more balanced and accountable approach to America's economic future. The Supreme Court's decision marks a pivotal moment in the nation's economic landscape. Its effects will quickly ripple through the economy, touching nearly every sector and community. For automakers, construction and appliance companies, the removal of tariffs means lower costs for raw materials and components, which could lead to increased production, more competitive pricing, and potentially more jobs on the factory floor. But for American steel and aluminum producers, the loss of protection sparks real fears, concerns about layoffs, plant closures, and the erosion of industries that have long been pillars of local economies. Communities in states like Pennsylvania and Ohio, where these industries are lifelines, now worry about their economic future and the stability of local jobs. For consumers, the impact may not be immediate. While many hope for lower prices, companies might first use the savings to rebuild profits or invest in new technology before passing on any benefits. Over time, however, lower manufacturing costs should make goods like cars, appliances, and electronics more affordable, gradually easing the strain on household budgets. Economists are split. Some predict overall growth and increased consumer spending as a result of lower costs, while others warn that domestic industries could suffer, leading to job losses and weakened communities. The true impact will depend on how quickly businesses adapt to the new environment, how workers retrain, and what new policies emerge from lawmakers. The ruling sets off a complex chain reaction, affecting workers, companies, and families nationwide, with consequences that will unfold over months and years. The economic story is just beginning to unfold, and its chapters remain unwritten. All eyes are now on Congress and the White House, as the nation waits to see what steps leaders will take next to shape the future. The Supreme Court's ruling has deepened partisan divides in Washington. The White House treads carefully, balancing support for American workers with respect for the court's decision. Republicans who back the tariffs decry the ruling as judicial overreach, vowing to restore protections for U.S. industries. Democrats mostly celebrate, calling it a win for consumers and global cooperation, though some progressives urge new worker protections. The political landscape is fractured, setting the stage for a fierce legislative battle. Congress must now navigate competing interests and ideologies to shape future trade policy. The debate goes beyond tariffs. It's about America's role in the global economy. Expect intense lobbying and high-stakes negotiations in the weeks ahead. The fallout from the court's decision will dominate Washington's agenda. The Supreme Court's decision has sent ripples across the globe. U.S. allies like Canada, Mexico, and the EU welcome the ruling, seeing it as a chance to reset trade relations and end retaliatory measures. The EU is poised to drop its counter-tariffs, hoping for deeper cooperation with Washington. China's response is more guarded, viewing the move as both an opportunity and a sign of U.S. political instability. The ruling does little to resolve deeper U.S. China disputes over intellectual property and market access. For the World Trade Organization, this is a symbolic win, reinforcing the value of multilateral dispute resolution. The decision may help revive efforts to reform and strengthen global trade rules. The world is watching how America's new trade approach will unfold. The legal battle centered on Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a Cold War-era law granting presidents power to restrict imports for national security. The Trump administration argued this authority was broad, covering not just defense needs, but the entire industrial base. Challengers countered that the law was never meant to let presidents reshape the whole economy. They argued tariffs on allies undermined the national security rationale. The Supreme Court sided with the challengers, invoking the non-delegation doctrine. Congress can't hand over its legislative powers without clear limits. The court didn't strike down Section 232, but sharply narrowed its use. Future tariffs must be tied to specific, credible threats, not vague claims. The ruling redefines how national security can justify trade actions. The Supreme Court's decision rewrites the rules for future presidents on trade. Broad unilateral tariffs justified by vague national security claims are now off the table. Presidents must build specific cases for trade restrictions and work with Congress for new authority. This shift means more focus on negotiations and multilateral agreements, less on go-it-alone tariffs. The World Trade Organization and other forums may regain influence as dispute resolvers. Presidents will need to invest political capital in building bipartisan support for trade actions. Expect more targeted measures, like sanctions or Buy American policies, rather than sweeping tariffs. The challenge now is advancing economic goals within tighter legal boundaries. With the court's decision in place, Congress and the White House face urgent choices on trade. The administration must unwind the tariffs while balancing demands from both industry and consumers. Congress now has a blank slate and a mandate to legislate. Lawmakers must decide whether to create a new framework for presidential tariff authority, with clearer limits and oversight. Achieving consensus will be tough, as protectionists and free traders clash across party lines. The process will test Congress's ability to function in a polarized era. Failure to act could leave the U.S. without tools to address unfair trade. Beyond immediate legislation, this is a chance to rethink America's place in the global economy. The path forward demands compromise and vision from both branches. The stakes for American workers, businesses, and consumers couldn't be higher. The Supreme Court's decision is a powerful reaffirmation of checks and balances in American democracy. For years, presidents have expanded executive power, especially on trade and national security. The court's ruling draws a clear line, reminding the nation that presidential authority is not absolute. Congress must reclaim its constitutional role in shaping trade policy. This moment challenges lawmakers to engage in real debate and take responsibility for America's economic future. The case shows the resilience of the U.S. system. Even in polarized times, the balance of power can be restored. The enduring lesson: democracy depends on each branch doing its part to keep government accountable.